The day the tornado hit, I was at work, my mind buried in mundane tasks, unaware of the chaos brewing at home. It was a typical spring day in our small town, the kind where the weather can't decide between sunshine and storms. When my phone rang, displaying my neighbor's number, I felt a spike of unease. "Emily, you need to come home now," her voice trembled. "It's your house, the tornado." My heart sank. I rushed through the emptying streets, the sky a menacing shade of gray. Turning onto our street was like entering a nightmare. Trees uprooted, power lines down, our neighborhood looked like a war zone. And there, standing defiant yet wounded, was our home. The sight of it brought a lump to my throat. Windows shattered, the roof partially torn off, our beloved home was a shell of its former self. But it was still standing. That was something. Thankfully, no one was home when the tornado struck. My husband, Mark, and our 2 kids were safe, which was all that truly mattered. But as we stood there, surveying the damage, I felt a sense of loss for the life we had built within those walls. We spent the next few hours salvaging what we could. Our neighbors, true to the spirit of our tight-knit community, rallied around us, offering help and support. In the midst of this chaos, there was a sense of unity, a shared resolve to rebuild not just our home, but our lives. That evening, we found temporary refuge at my sister's house. Exhausted, I finally had a moment to sit down and check my phone. It buzzed relentlessly with messages and missed calls. As I scrolled through, one particular notification caught my eye. It was a Facebook post from my mother-in-law, Linda. The post was dramatic, to say the least, claiming our house was completely destroyed. I felt a surge of irritation. Linda had a penchant for exaggeration, especially on social media, but this was a new low, even for her. "Can you believe this?" I showed the post to Mark, who let out a weary sigh. "She just doesn't get it," he said, his voice a mix of anger and resignation. "She knows I hate it when she posts about our personal life." The post had already gathered a string of comments, people expressing shock and sorrow, offering prayers and help. It was a kind gesture from the community, but based on false pretenses. I wanted to correct the post, to set the record straight, but Mark placed a hand on my shoulder. "Let's just deal with it tomorrow," he said. "We've got enough on our plate right now." He was right, of course. But as I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep, I couldn't shake off a growing sense of anger. Linda's actions, though perhaps well-intentioned, had crossed a line, and I was determined to make her understand that. The morning light did little to ease the heaviness in my heart. As I scrolled through the endless messages on my phone, Linda's post from last night glared back at me, a stark reminder of the unwanted drama unfolding alongside our real crisis. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, I pondered my next move. Mark, ever the peacemaker, suggested letting it go, focusing on our immediate needs instead. But the more I thought about it, the more Linda's actions bothered me. It wasn't just about the post. It was about respect, privacy, and understanding boundaries. I decided to call Linda, hoping a direct conversation might resolve the issue. The phone rang, and after a couple of tones, her cheerful voice filled the line. "Emily, darling, how are you holding up? I've been so worried." "Linda, we need to talk about your Facebook post," I said, cutting to the chase. There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, that," she replied, her tone shifting. "I was just trying to let our friends and family know what happened. Gather some support for you all." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my frustration in check. "Linda, our house wasn't destroyed. It's badly damaged, yes, but your post is misleading, and Mark specifically dislikes personal matters being shared on social media." There was another pause, longer this time. "Well, I didn't mean any harm," she said defensively. "I just wanted to help." I softened my tone. "I appreciate that, Linda, but this isn't the way. Can you please correct the post? People are worried unnecessarily." There was a reluctant murmur of agreement from her before we ended the call. I felt a small victory, but the irritation lingered. I couldn't shake off the feeling that Linda's actions were more about garnering attention for herself than genuinely helping us. The rest of the day was a blur of phone calls and arrangements, insurance agents, contractors, family members offering help. In the midst of it all, I kept thinking about Linda and the impact of her thoughtlessness. It was a small part of a much larger problem, but it felt symbolic of the lack of understanding and respect that had always tinged our relationship. That evening, as we gathered at my sister's house for a makeshift dinner, the conversation inevitably turned to the Facebook fiasco. My sister, always the outspoken one, didn't mince words. "You should give her a taste of her own medicine," she said, half joking. "See how she likes it when her personal business is all over the internet." Her words, meant in jest, sparked an idea in my mind. A plan began to form, one that would teach Linda a lesson in a way she wouldn't expect. It was risky, potentially petty, but at that moment, it felt like the perfect response to an ongoing problem. The next day dawned with a sense of purpose for me. As I surveyed the damage to our home once more, I couldn't help but think about the unnecessary chaos Linda's post had caused. The more I reflected on it, the more it felt like a symptom of a much larger issue in our relationship with her. She often overstepped boundaries without considering the consequences, and this time I was determined to make her realize the impact of her actions. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of Linda's exaggerated post continued. Mark's aunt, who had taken the post at face value, had shared her own version of the story, further distorting the truth. This led to a cascade of concerned calls and messages, adding to our already overwhelming situation. Mark, seeing the stress it was causing, finally agreed that something needed to be done. "I just don't understand why she always has to make things about her," he said, frustration evident in his voice. As we sat in the living room of my sister's house, surrounded by a few salvaged belongings, the reality of our situation hit me. We were in the middle of a crisis, yet part of our energy was being drained by a needless social media drama. That evening, I started to put my plan into action. It was simple, yet effective. I would give Linda a taste of her own medicine by sharing a post about her on Facebook. But not just any post. It would be a carefully crafted story, exaggerated just enough to make a point, yet harmless enough not to cause real damage. I spent some time composing the post, ensuring it was just right. "Feeling grateful for Linda," I began, "who bravely saved a stray cat during the storm and is now nursing it back to health at home." It was a complete fabrication, of course, but plausible enough to be believed. I hesitated for a moment before hitting post. This was not my usual style, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I thought about the stress her post had caused us, and with a mix of apprehension and determination, I shared the story. Within minutes, the post started to gain traction. Comments poured in, praising Linda's heroism and kindness. I watched as the notifications flooded in, a part of me feeling guilty for stooping to her level, yet another part feeling a sense of vindication. The following day, Linda called, flustered and overwhelmed by the attention the post had garnered. "Emily, I don't know what to do. Everyone is asking about this cat, and I don't even have one." I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's overwhelming when people share things about you on social media, isn't it?" There was a long pause on the other end. I see your point," she finally said, her voice a mixture of embarrassment and realization. It was a small victory, but an important one. Linda had finally experienced firsthand the impact of her actions. It was a lesson in empathy, delivered through the very medium she couldn't resist. The aftermath of my Facebook post was immediate and revealing. The phone call with Linda had ended on an awkward note, but it sparked a necessary conversation. Later that day, she came over to my sister's house, a rare gesture of humility in her eyes. "I didn't realize how my actions affected you and Mark," Linda began, her usual confident demeanor replaced by a hint of vulnerability. "I never intended to cause you more stress." I appreciated her effort to understand, but years of accumulated frustration bubbled to the surface. "Linda, it's not just about the post. It's about respecting our privacy. Mark has told you many times he doesn't like personal things shared on social media." Linda nodded, looking genuinely remorseful. "I guess I got carried away with wanting to be a part of everything. I didn't think about the consequences." The conversation that followed was long overdue. We talked about boundaries, respect, and the importance of communication. For the first time, I felt like Linda was truly listening, not just hearing what she wanted to. Mark joined us, and together, we began to untangle the complicated web of our family dynamics. It was a difficult conversation, filled with moments of tension and relief, but it was necessary, a step towards understanding and healing. As Linda left, she turned to me. Thank you for the eye-opener, Emily. I promise to be more thoughtful in the future. The confrontation had been cathartic, but it left me with mixed feelings. My plan had worked, but I couldn't shake off the guilt of using deception, even if it was for a good cause. The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. We began the arduous process of repairing our home, buoyed by the support of our community. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a sense of purpose and determination. In the midst of the chaos, I often found myself reflecting on the confrontation with Linda. It had been a turning point, not just in our relationship with her, but in how I viewed conflicts and resolutions. I realized that sometimes it takes a drastic measure to bring about change, but the real challenge lies in handling the consequences with grace and understanding. As we slowly put our home and lives back together, I felt a newfound sense of resilience. The tornado had taken much from us, but it had also given us something unexpected, a chance to rebuild, not just our house, but our relationships and ourselves. In the days following the confrontation with Linda, there was a palpable shift in our family dynamics. The air was clearer, albeit still tinged with the remnants of past grievances. Linda's visits became more considerate, and our conversations more meaningful. Yet a part of me remained wary, unconvinced that old habits could change so quickly. As we navigated through the complexities of rebuilding our home, I found myself mulling over the effectiveness of my little plot. It was a tactic I was not proud of, but it had sparked a necessary change. This realization led me to reflect on the concept of revenge. Was it always a negative impulse, or could it, in some contexts, be a catalyst for positive change? I discussed these thoughts with Mark one evening as we sat amidst boxes of salvaged belongings at my sister's house. I keep thinking about what I did with that Facebook post, I admitted. Part of me feels guilty, but another part feels like it was the only way to get through to your mom. Mark took my hand, his eyes understanding. I know it wasn't easy for you, but it did make a difference. Sometimes we need to shake things up to make people see things differently. Encouraged by his words, I started to view my actions in a different light. Revenge, in its many forms, is often seen as a petty or destructive force. But in this case, it had served as a mirror, reflecting the consequences of one's actions back at them. This perspective became a source of strength for me. As we worked through the endless tasks of restoration and dealing with insurance claims, I found a newfound assertiveness. I was no longer hesitant to speak my mind, especially when it came to decisions about our home and family. Linda, for her part, seemed to have taken the lesson to heart. Her interactions with us became more thoughtful, and she was noticeably more restrained on social media. It was a small, yet significant change, one that improved the overall atmosphere whenever we gathered as a family. During this period, I also learned the importance of forgiveness. Holding on to anger and resentment was like carrying a heavy burden, that one that I no longer wished to bear. Forgiving Linda did not mean forgetting what had happened, but it allowed me to move forward without the weight of past conflicts. As our home slowly came back to life, so did our spirits. The process of rebuilding was not just about repairing walls and roofs, but about mending relationships and redefining boundaries. The storm had brought destruction, but in its wake it left room for growth and renewal. The reconstruction of our home progressed steadily, a tangible symbol of our family's resilience. With each repaired wall and repainted room, I felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. This period of rebuilding was not just physical, it was emotional and relational as well. My plan, which had initially been born out of frustration and a desire for revenge, had unexpectedly opened a path to healing and understanding. Linda's transformation, though gradual, was evident. She became more mindful of her words and actions, showing a level of consideration that was previously absent. One weekend, as we were unpacking some boxes in the newly restored living room, Linda dropped by, unannounced yet welcome. She came bearing a homemade cake, a small but significant gesture. We sat around the kitchen table, savoring the cake and the comfort of easy conversation. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," Linda began, her tone reflective. "I realize now how much I've overstepped in the past. I'm sorry for the stress I caused you both." Her apology was sincere, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. It was the closure I hadn't realized I needed. "Thank you, Linda. I said, meaning every word. It means a lot to us. As we talked, I saw a new side of Linda. She listened more than she spoke, her responses thoughtful and considerate. It was a stark contrast to the Linda I had known, the one who always seemed to be at the center of every conversation. This change in Linda had a ripple effect on our family dynamics. Mark and I found ourselves looking forward to her visits, appreciating her efforts to be a better mother and mother-in-law. Our conversations delved deeper, moving beyond surface-level pleasantries to genuine discussions about life, dreams, and fears. In these moments, I realized the power of communication and empathy. My initial plan, conceived in a moment of frustration, had unknowingly paved the way for a deeper connection. It was a reminder that sometimes the most challenging situations can lead to the most profound transformations. As our home neared completion, so did our journey of reconciliation and understanding. The experience had taught us the value of patience, forgiveness, and the strength of family bonds. We had weathered the storm, both literal and metaphorical, emerging stronger and more united. With our home fully restored and our family relationships on a new, healthier trajectory, I took a moment to reflect on the journey we had undergone. The once damaged walls of our home now stood strong and vibrant, echoing the transformation within our family. Linda's evolution was the most remarkable. The once overbearing and intrusive mother-in-law had become a thoughtful and considerate part of our lives. Her change was not just in her actions, but in her understanding of us as a family. She respected our boundaries and became an integral, positive force in our lives. This transformation was not lost on our extended family and friends. They noticed the change in dynamics, often commenting on the newfound harmony at family gatherings. It was a testament to the power of communication and the willingness to change. As for me, the entire ordeal had been a profound learning experience. I had confronted a challenging situation with a plan that, in retrospect, was risky and could have backfired. But it had led to a positive outcome, teaching me the importance of standing up for what I believed was right, albeit in a non-conventional way. I shared these reflections with Mark one evening as we sat in our rejuvenated living room. I never thought that a plan born out of frustration would lead to such a positive change, I mused. Mark smiled, taking my hand. Sometimes it's the unexpected paths that lead us to the best destinations. I'm just glad we've come out of this stronger as a family. The incident with the tornado and the subsequent fallout with Linda had brought us closer together. It had shown us the strength of our bond, the resilience of our family, and the transformative power of empathy and understanding. Our home, once a symbol of loss and chaos, had become a haven of love and unity. It stood as a reminder that out of destruction can come growth, and out of conflict can come harmony. We had not only rebuilt our home, but had also restructured our family dynamics into something stronger and more meaningful. As I looked around at the walls that had witnessed so much, I felt a deep sense of peace and gratitude. We had weathered the storm, and in its wake, we found a deeper appreciation for each other and the home we shared.
My name is Katie. Last Christmas, I accidentally accumulated about 6 pounds of fat from eating luxurious Christmas dishes. So this year, I am dieting in preparation for Christmas. If I lose 6 pounds now, I'll be okay even if I gain 6 pounds during Christmas. Huh? That's not how it works? No way. From Christmas to New Year's, there's just too much delicious food. Soon, I'll even buy some Valentine's chocolate for myself. Oops, I'm drooling. Looks like I'm going to get fat this year too, sigh. So, today is about a winter memory of mine. I'd love for you to hear it. It was when I was 25 years old. I had been dating my boyfriend, Edward, for several years, and our marriage had been decided. I introduced Edward to my parents, a so-called marriage introduction. My parents liked Edward, and the marriage would have gone smoothly. But a problem occurred. As soon as my older sister, Cindy, returned from work, she was smitten with Edward. It's strange, but as sisters, I could understand her feelings and thoughts. Cindy had fallen in love with Edward at first sight. I hoped it was just my imagination. But Cindy had blushed and held his hand when Edward reached out to shake hands. She always looked up at him when talking. I think it's inappropriate for a sister's boyfriend, but she probably did it unconsciously. You can't stop people's feelings, and I assumed Cindy wouldn't get serious and would stop herself at some point. However, after Edward left, Cindy caught me fresh out of the bath and in just a towel and said, "You should call off the wedding." When I asked why, she said things like, "That man is a player and you can find someone better." However, there was no basis for these claims. "Why do you think he's a player?" I asked. Cindy replied, "It's a woman's intuition." Cindy had never had a boyfriend before. How could I believe the intuition of someone with no experience in relationships? Instead, I trust the character of Edward, whom I have observed for years. Naturally, I took my sister's advice lightly and didn't really pay much attention to it. Edward started visiting my parents' house more often since he said he wanted to get along with my family. My parents were happy, and I certainly didn't mind my future husband getting along with my parents. A good relationship was being built. But Cindy was trying to build a different kind of good relationship with Edward. According to Edward, when I wasn't around, Cindy grabbed his arm, pressed her chest against him, and asked, "Don't you think Katie is childish?" She even asked for his contact information and pretended to fall and expose her skirt. Edward found it so contrived that it was funny. If he had taken it seriously, I would have been really worried. But Cindy, thinking that Edward wouldn't reject her strongly because she was my sister, kept pressing him with a sweet voice whenever they met. Originally, it was love at first sight. But the fact that Edward worked for a fairly large company also hit Cindy's heart hard. He's a man with good prospects and my type, she locked on and wouldn't let go. My parents saw Cindy's shameful behavior but said nothing. Or rather, they have never said anything to Cindy, it wasn't new. Honestly, Cindy has always been the type who can't do anything. If you ask her to reheat side dishes, she somehow manages to melt non-heat resistant plastic plates in the microwave. And, as always, she was bad at studying. She was bad at sports, especially swimming lessons, which she always tried to skip by using any means possible, hurting her leg, feeling unwell, or getting a rash. She couldn't do studies, sports, or housework. Honestly, she wasn't even particularly good-looking. But our parents, simply because she was the eldest daughter, doted on Cindy and ordered me to support her behind the scenes. Behind the scenes, because I shouldn't stand out, I was supposed to highlight my sister. It's a harsh story for siblings. Well, for our parents. The helpless poor child was probably a factor that made Cindy endearing. Weirdly, I was capable of anything, the type that could learn anything quickly. Adults might have found it unappealing because I was too teachable. So I even effortlessly managed the mission of highlighting my sister. And there was a time when I pretended to be incapable outside the home. After I outgrew my teenage years, I thought, if I keep this up, I'll fail my exams. And began to rebel against my parents and do as I pleased. If I had continued listening to them, I might have really become incapable. This rebellion made Cindy start to dislike me a bit for no longer supporting her. But we were never on bad terms. We talked normally, and I even advised her occasionally. The extreme doting on Cindy and her hostility toward me. There were some twisted aspects, but it was still a normal family. However, because Edward never showed interest in Cindy, this balance was disrupted. I can't approve of my younger sister getting married first. The night before the wedding, Cindy told our parents, "No, it's okay, Cindy will get married soon too." That's right, Cindy. It's not about that. Normally, the elder sister marries before the younger one does. She's too young for marriage. But the wedding is tomorrow. What, Mom, you're not on my side? Am I going to be the pitiful elder sister who gets married off after her younger sister? That's not. I quietly listened to my sister's meltdown in the living room from the hallway. Should I wait for my inexperienced sister to get married? I'd get old in no time. Really, what is she talking about? Well, she'll calm down once she vents, I assumed. All right. Dad and Mom will skip the wedding tomorrow, so please forgive us. Right, Cindy? What? I couldn't believe my ears. Mom also agreed with Dad, begging Cindy for forgiveness. What is this? Followers of my sister? It was almost like worship. This was beyond mere doting. But Cindy sighed and reluctantly agreed, fine, I'll put up with that. At least make it a wedding not recognized by the family. She really didn't want me and Edward to get married. Probably because she was in love with him. Unbelievable. Because of Cindy's unrequited love, my parents decided not to attend the wedding. On the day of the wedding, which was supposed to be a sunny day, I couldn't sleep well and was completely sleep deprived. It wasn't because I was too excited about the wedding. I spent the whole night feeling sick, remembering the conversation between my sister and parents. When my parents officially informed me of their decision to skip the wedding, I'll never forget the smirking look on my sister's face. At the venue, I had to tell Edward and his parents about my parents' absence. I'm sorry. My sister opposed this marriage, so my family will be absent, I said. There couldn't be a more miserable report. Parents not attending their daughter's wedding, even his parents couldn't believe it. Edward's parents were silent for a while after hearing my report. On what was supposed to be a festive day, such a heavy atmosphere. It was the worst. At that moment, my mother-in-law took my hand. And soon after, my father-in-law placed his hand on top of ours. You have a family right here, don't you? Forget about it? Please don't make today a sad day. Look, smile. With my mother-in-law's gentle smile and the warmth of my father-in-law's hand, I burst into tears. Hey, Katie. I'm your husband. Don't say things like my family is absent, it makes me sad. Edward gently stroked my head. Tears streamed down my face as my in-laws. And Edward frantically but laughingly tried to calm me down. Bride. Don't cry, don't cry. Look, your makeup. In the midst of all this, my mother-in-law looked me straight in the face and said, Katie, it might be hard to leave your family behind. But this will surely be a new beginning. Now, go build your own family. Feeling abandoned by my biological parents, my mother-in-law held me tight. Edward and my father-in-law followed suit. It'll be all right. Just as my mother-in-law said, this will be a new beginning. I vowed to build a happy family of my own, and so, I married Edward without a hitch. 15 years later, a daughter and 2 sons were born between my husband and me. My daughter, capable and able to do anything, naturally took care of her 2 rowdy brothers who were always wreaking havoc at home. Still, her way of scolding them, enough already, sounded just like me. Oh dear, what a handful. Edward's job was going smoothly, and we had bought a single-family home. Enjoying peaceful days, until troublemakers showed up, none other than my father, mother, and sister. We had been estranged since the wedding, and I hadn't given them our new address. However, somehow, the three of them showed up at our house. Naturally, the first words upon seeing their faces weren't warm greetings like, "Long time no see, but what are you doing here?" "There's something we need from Katie," said my sister. Even my parents begged me, saying, "You're the only one we can ask." What could it be? What could they possibly need from someone they haven't seen in 15 years? As I stood silent, mixed feelings of wanting and not wanting to hear more, my mother broke the silence. "Give Cindy your husband." What? Even Edward, who had come to the door to check what was happening, stood dumbfounded just like me. Wait. I don't follow. Why would you say I should give Edward to Cindy? I asked sharply, and both my parents looked embarrassed, while only my sister seemed arrogantly assured. Cindy is still single. She's turning 42 this year. And what of it? I was even more puzzled by my father's words. Edward felt the same way. The truth is, Cindy's company went bankrupt recently, and she's now unemployed. Oh, that's unfortunate. Being single and jobless, you can understand we're worried about Cindy's future. Your sisters, after all, you should feel the same. Looking into my parents' eyes staring intently at me, I thought to myself, no, not really. But kept quiet, more curious about what they would say next, despite finding the conversation tedious. I just wanted them to get to the point without interrupting. It turns out, Cindy has always loved Edward, and she's still alone. You've enjoyed your married life with Edward, right? Please, let Cindy have the rest of her life with him. What the? While I was stunned, Edward looked at me, unable to keep up with the sudden turn of events, as if his soul had left his body. Ignoring us, my parents begged, and my sister still sat there smugly, as if certain that Edward would be hers. Well, our parents always gave her anything she wanted. Maybe that's why she's so mistaken, but this is just awful. As I held my head in shock, Edward pulled me aside. It seemed his soul had returned. Hey, isn't this a chance? Are you thinking what I'm thinking? Yeah, because it's like that joke you made while drunk has come to life. Should we do it? We quickly separated and faced my sister and parents again. So, Cindy, you really love Edward that much? To my question, my sister, surprised, said, "Eh? Yes, yes. I've always loved him, really, really loved him." I see. That's some strong feeling. You've loved someone else's husband for 15 years, right? Yes, it's been tough, thinking of you and Edward together. We were getting along so well. Despite her confidently smug expression, Edward and I managed to keep straight faces. We lost then. If you feel that strongly, I'll step aside. The words shocked our parents. Immediately, my mother exclaimed, "Really? But you loved Edward too, didn't you?" Well, actually, Edward has also. I've always loved Cindy. Following my lead, Edward responded without missing a beat, causing my sister's face to turn bright red. See? I knew it. You didn't mind when I linked arms with you. The way you looked at me, it was so affectionate. It's been a long wait, we're finally going to be together. I struggled to keep from laughing. Hey, Edward, you're looking down. pretending to tear up, but I can see your shoulders shaking. Hang in there. Let's spend our lives together, Ned. Cindy, who had been calling him by his name until just now, suddenly started calling him by a nickname. Over these 15 years, she must have built up quite an intense imaginary relationship with Edward in her mind. I'm happy, Cindy. Support me from now on, Edward smiled too. Yes. Of course. Then I'm quitting my job. What? Her blush vanished in an instant, her eyes wide with shock. I want to be with you every second, without wasting a moment. So I'm quitting my job to always be by your side. What? I won't even go outside. If possible, follow me to the bathroom. I'll always be watching you while you do the housework. As Edward cheerfully spoke, my sister froze, then began to panic. My parents were also flustered. I'm not working either, so that would be troubling. Why? If we're together, what's there to fear? Even without money, we'd be happy, right? No, but there are insurance premiums and stuff in modern America. This isn't some old tale. You mean you can't love me without money? It's not like that. Her eyes clearly avoided mine. I quickly chimed in. Well, Edward, make sure you pay a generous alimony when we divorce, okay? Edward smiled. Don't worry, your sister and your parents will take care of it. This caused my parents to pale and exchange glances. Cindy, I think it's not right to take a husband from your sister after all. That's right, Cindy. That's going a bit too far. Their sudden change of heart was as dramatically swift as it was beautiful. What? You guys said you would definitely get Edward for me. No, but Cindy, that's a different matter. Shut up, shut up, shut up. Whose side are you on? My sister was in a frenzy, yanking at our mother's hair as she tried to calm her, while our father desperately tried to intervene. It was like a scene from hell. And Edward and I just watched for a while. Finally, Edward, trying to change the course of the conversation, said, excuse me. Everyone suddenly turned to look at him. Honestly, I'm not at all into your sister. I was being polite because she's Katie's sister, but honestly, I can't stand women who make passes like that. It's just a turn-off. Yeah, exactly. It's a total turn-off. And the assumption that I like her is just too much. I really can't deal with women who jump to conclusions like that. Edward's frankness left my sister and our parents speechless. Huh? So what was all that before, Ned? Could you not call my husband by his nickname? There's no way Edward could love you, Cindy. We have children and we're happy together. I intervened as my sister approached Edward with a pale face. What the heck, Cindy? You tricked us. How can you not realize you were being tricked? Why would a man you haven't heard from in 15 years suddenly be in love with you? Are you delusional? My sister's face turned red with tears, probably from frustration. If you were such a charming woman, it might be one thing. But no one wants a delusional woman who's unemployed and leeching off her parents. Plus, you've always had your mom do the household chores. So you probably can't even handle those, right? With those skills at over 40, even if you got married, you'd likely be dumped. Edward laughed in the background, seemingly hitting the mark. As my sister couldn't stop her tears, sobbing uncontrollably. My parents comforted her, but looked troubled as if to say, she's got a point. Well, that's how it is. Edward isn't going anywhere. That's right, so please give up, big sister. My sister broke down completely, crying childishly. It's embarrassing for an adult. She really hasn't grown up at all. Learn from this and don't get involved with us ever again. We're cutting ties with you for good. If Cindy struggles because she's unemployed, don't expect any help from us. With that, I closed the front door. When the kids asked what was happening, I said, "It's almost Halloween and it seems a bad demon showed up at the wrong time." My eldest son suggested seeing her, which I stopped. But from outside, we could still hear my sister's wails. 5 years later, Cindy is still single as expected. She managed to find a job, but due to her reckless behavior, hitting on young coworkers and married men, she was eventually fired. Desperate for marriage, she continued her antics and is now banned from matchmaking parties. It looks like she'll remain single for life. My parents, even after retirement, work multiple jobs to save money, likely realizing they can't depend on Cindy for their future care. After all the doting they did, they should work hard and realize it's because of their sister. Meanwhile, I live a relaxed life as a housewife, thanks to my capable children and husband's earnings. No need for a job, though sometimes I wonder if working would have balanced out my overeating during Christmas. As my daughter, who is perfectly slim, declares she wants to diet, I try desperately to stop her. Wait until you've grown sideways like your mom. My 2 sons have taken up dancing, recently performed at a local event, and dream of joining a famous dance group. Please keep the group going until my sons grow up, I think to myself. My in-laws frequently visit, and we often share meals. I call them in-laws here, but honestly, I think of them as my real parents. We're planning a luxurious resort vacation during the Easter holidays. I hope they stay healthy and continue to share their lives with us. Though things were rough before marriage, it's been nothing but happiness since. I truly feel I've found my real family.
I never thought I'd be the kind of person to read someone else's private diary, but there I was, sitting cross-legged on my father's office floor at midnight, holding his leather-bound journal in trembling hands. The study still smelled like him. A mix of coffee and that fancy cologne my mother had given him last Christmas. My name is Jamie, and until 3 hours ago, I was just a normal 15-year-old trying to deal with my dad's cancer diagnosis. Now I'm not sure what I am. It started when I heard voices downstairs. Mom wasn't supposed to be home until tomorrow. She told us she was visiting her sister in Phoenix. But there she was, giggling in our kitchen at midnight with a man who definitely wasn't my father. "We need to be careful," I heard Mom say. "Thomas isn't completely out of it yet." The man's voice was smooth, confident. "Vivian, sweetheart, you worry too much. Everything's going according to plan." I should have stormed down there. Should have screamed or called my dad at the hospital. Instead, I crept into his study looking for, I don't know what. Answers? Evidence? That's when I found the diary, tucked behind some old tax files. The first entry was from 6 months ago. I don't want to believe it, but something's wrong with Vivian. The late nights, the secret phone calls. I've seen how she looks at my business partner, Ethan. But I need proof before I confront her. Jamie needs to be protected. She's all that matters now. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the journal. Dad had known? All this time. The next entry made my stomach turn. Doctor says it's stage 4. Vivian acted devastated, but I caught her smiling when she thought I wasn't looking. I've changed my will today. Everything goes to Jamie, with Mom as trustee until she's 21. Vivian won't see it coming. I heard footsteps on the stairs and quickly shoved the diary into my hoodie pocket. The voices were getting closer. "I'll check on Jamie," Mom said. "She should be asleep by now." I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. There was no time to return the diary to its hiding place. Instead, I dove into the hallway bathroom, closing the door just as their shadows passed by. Your daughter's quite the daddy's girl, the man then said. Might be a problem later. Mom's laugh was cold, unfamiliar. She's just a kid. Once Thomas is gone, she'll adjust. They all do. I pressed my hand against my mouth, fighting back tears. The mother I thought I knew would never talk about Dad dying like it was something to look forward to. Would never dismiss me like I was just some inconvenience to her plans. When their footsteps faded, I snuck back to my room, diary clutched against my chest like a shield. Sleep was impossible. I spent the rest of the night reading entry after entry, watching my father's suspicions grow alongside his illness. The last entry was from just 2 days ago, written in shaky handwriting. Jamie, if you're reading this, I'm so sorry. I should have protected you better. Don't let them win. You're stronger than you know. Love, Dad. Morning came too quickly. I hid the diary under my mattress and got ready for school, my mind racing. Mom was in the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened, like she hadn't spent the night plotting with her lover in our home, while Dad lay dying in a hospital bed. Morning, sweetie, she said, sliding a plate of pancakes across the counter. Sleep well. I looked at her perfect makeup, her practiced smile, and felt sick. Fine, I lied, pushing the plate away. I'm not hungry. She frowned, touching my forehead. You feeling okay? You look pale. I jerked away from her hand. For the first time, I saw what Dad must have seen, the calculation behind her concern, the performance of it all. I'm fine, I repeated, grabbing my backpack. Just tired. As I walked to school, Dad's last words echoed in my head. Don't let them win. But how was I, a 15-year-old kid, supposed to stop whatever my mother and Ethan were planning? I didn't know yet. But I was about to find out. The hospital always smelled like despair mixed with hand sanitizer. I sat beside Dad's bed watching him sleep, while Mom texted someone in the corner. Probably Ethan. My stomach churned every time her phone lit up with a new message. I'm going to get coffee, Mom announced, not even looking up from her screen. Want anything, Jamie? I shook my head, keeping my eyes on Dad. The moment she left, I pulled out my phone and started recording just in case. Dad had taught me to always document everything in business. Trust but verify, he'd say. Now I was using his lessons against the people trying to hurt him. His eyes fluttered open. Hey, kiddo. His voice was weaker than yesterday, but his smile was the same. Where's your mother? Coffee run. I squeezed his hand. How are you feeling? Like I could run a marathon. He tried to laugh but ended up coughing instead. When he caught his breath, he looked at me with worried eyes. Jamie, there's something we need to talk about. The door opened and Mom swept in with her coffee. Dad immediately went quiet, and I felt the weight of unspoken words hanging between us. Thomas, darling, Ethan called about the Peterson contract, Mom said, settling into her chair. He needs your signature on some documents. Dad's face hardened. Tell Ethan nothing gets signed until I review everything personally. But honey, he says it's urgent. No signatures, Dad repeated firmly. I watched Mom's perfectly manicured fingers tighten around her coffee cup. For a split second, her mask slipped, and I saw raw anger flash across her face. The tension was broken by a knock at the door. Grandma Margaret walked in, bringing with her the smell of fresh-baked cookies and normalcy. Well, this is a gloomy bunch, she announced, setting down her purse. Thomas, you look terrible. Vivian, that shade of lipstick doesn't suit you at all. I had to hide my smile. Grandma Margaret had never bothered with social niceties, especially when it came to Mom. Margaret, Mom said through gritted teeth. What a surprise. Shouldn't be. I'm here every Tuesday. Grandma turned to me. Jamie, dear, help me get some ice for your father. In the hallway, Grandma grabbed my arm. Something's wrong. I can see it in your face. I hesitated, then pulled her into an empty waiting room. I found Dad's diary, I whispered, quickly explaining everything I'd discovered. Grandma's face grew darker with each word. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. I always knew that woman would bring trouble, she finally said. But this. She squeezed my hand. We need proof, Jamie. Real proof. I've been recording everything, I admitted. But it's not enough. No, it's not. She glanced toward the door. Your mother's planning something with that snake Ethan. Those documents she mentioned? I bet they're not what they seem. Before I could respond, we heard Mom's heels clicking down the hallway. Jamie? Margaret? Where did you go? Remember, Grandma whispered quickly, your father built that company from nothing. Don't let them steal it. When we returned with the ice, Mom was on the phone again, speaking in hushed tones. She quickly hung up when she saw us. Everything okay? I asked innocently. Of course, sweetie. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Just business. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those documents Mom wanted Dad to sign. Around midnight I heard her car start up. Through my window I watched her drive away, heading to Ethan's, no doubt. I grabbed my phone and called Riley, my best friend since 3rd grade. She answered on the first ring. Your mom just left again? She asked without preamble. Yeah. Riley, I need a favor. A big one. Does it involve breaking and entering? Maybe just a little entering. Mom's office isn't technically locked. I'll be there in 10 minutes, Riley said. And Jamie? We're going to catch them. Whatever they're planning, they won't get away with it. As I waited for Riley, I pulled out Dad's diary and read his last entry again. Don't let them win. Well, Dad, I thought tonight we start fighting back. Little did I know what we'd find in Mom's office would change everything. Riley's flashlight beam swept across Mom's office as we crept inside. The house felt different at night, like it was holding its breath, waiting to catch us. Your mom's organizational skills are scary, Riley whispered, pointing at the meticulously labeled files on the desk. Who color codes their folders? Someone with secrets to hide, I muttered, pulling open the bottom drawer. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone, which I'd set to record everything, just in case. That's when we found it. A thick manila envelope marked Peterson contract, hidden beneath some tax forms. Inside were documents that made my blood run cold. Transfer of ownership papers for Dad's company, all prepared and waiting for his signature. Look at the fine print, Riley said, pointing to a clause near the bottom. If he signs this, he's basically giving everything to Ethan. Before I could respond, headlights swept across the windows. Mom was home early. Hide, I hissed, shoving the papers back into the drawer. We barely made it into the coat closet when the front door opened. But Mom wasn't alone. The papers are ready, Ethan's voice drifted in. We just need Thomas to sign them before he's too far gone to understand what he's signing. Mom's laugh was brittle. The doctors say it could be any day now. Vivian, darling, you're sure about this? Once it's done. I've spent 15 years playing the perfect wife, the devoted mother. I deserve something for my trouble. My chest felt tight. 15 years. I was 15. She'd been planning this since I was born? And what about Jamie? Ethan asked. She'll be fine. Children are resilient. Besides, once we have control of the company, we can send her to some boarding school overseas. She's too much like Thomas. Always watching, always suspicious. Riley grabbed my arm, probably worried I burst out of the closet right then. But I stayed frozen, recording every word as Mom and Ethan discussed their plans to dismantle my father's life's work. Finally, they left for the bedroom upstairs. Riley and I slipped out, but in my hurry, I knocked over an umbrella stand. The crash seemed to echo through the house. Jamie, Mom called down. Is that you? Sorry. Called back thinking fast. Just getting some water. Everything okay down there? Fine. Go back to sleep. I grabbed Riley's hand and we ran. Once we were safely in my room, Riley turned to me. Jamie, this is huge. We have to tell someone. Who? The police? They can't do anything. Dad hasn't signed anything yet. I played back the recording, my mother's cold words making me feel sick all over again. But Grandma Margaret was right. We need more proof. What are you thinking? I pulled out Dad's diary. Mom and Ethan are meeting their lawyer tomorrow at the Silver Spoon Cafe. Dad wrote about it here. He had someone following them. You want to spy on them? In public? No, I said slowly. I want to do something better. I showed her the cafe's website on my phone. They're hiring servers for the breakfast shift. Riley's eyes widened. Jamie, no. That's crazy. Crazy enough to work. You said your cousin manages the place, right? Yeah, but... Then call her. Tell her you know someone perfect for a one-day trial shift. I felt something hardening inside me, like steel forming in a forge. Mom never looks at servers. They're beneath her notice. And Ethan's never even met me. This is insane, Riley said, but she was already pulling out her phone. If they catch you, they won't. I thought about Dad in his hospital bed, about Mom's calculated betrayal, about 15 years of lies. Besides, what choice do I have? They're going to destroy everything Dad built. As Riley made the call, I stared at my reflection in the window. Tomorrow I wouldn't be Jamie Caldwell, devoted daughter. I'd be just another faceless server, invisible enough to witness everything. And this time I'd make sure everyone else saw the truth too. The Silver Spoon Cafe's kitchen was chaos, but it gave me the perfect cover. Nobody questioned the new server nervously fumbling with plates. They were too busy with the breakfast rush. I adjusted my borrowed uniform and name tag reading Sarah, while watching Mom's usual table through the service window. "Order up for table 12, someone shouted, making me jump. "That's your mother's table," Riley's cousin Emma whispered, sliding past me with a coffee pot. "Remember, act natural. You're just another face in the crowd." Mom arrived right on schedule, Ethan close behind. They sat in their usual corner booth, the one partially hidden by a decorative screen. Perfect for secret conversations. Not so perfect for their plans to stay secret. I grabbed the coffee pot and approached their table, keeping my head down. "Coffee?" Mom barely glanced at me. "Yes, fine." My hand shook slightly as I poured, but neither of them noticed. They were too absorbed in their paperwork. "The lawyers are concerned about the timing," Ethan was saying. "If Thomas dies before signing." "He won't," Mom cut in sharply. "I've arranged everything. Tomorrow morning when Jamie's at school, I'm bringing the papers to the hospital. He'll be cooperative." The coffee pot nearly slipped from my hand. What did she mean by cooperative? "More coffee?" I asked, desperate to hear more. "No, and we need privacy," Ethan snapped. I retreated to the kitchen, my mind racing. Tomorrow morning. They were moving faster than I'd expected. I had to warn Dad, but how? Mom barely left his side during visiting hours. My phone buzzed in my apron pocket. A text from Grandma Margaret. "Emergency. Call now." I ducked into the break room. "Grandma." "Jamie, where are you?" "Your father's asking for you. The doctors say." Her voice cracked. "You need to come now." The world tilted sideways. "I'm on my way." Back in the dining room, Mom and Ethan were huddled over what looked like medical documents. I wanted to grab them, to scream, to expose everything right there. Instead, I yanked off my apron and ran. At the hospital, Dad looked smaller somehow, drowning in white sheets and medical equipment. Grandma Margaret sat beside him, holding his hand. When she saw me, her eyes were red-rimmed but determined. "Jamie," Dad whispered. "Where's your mother?" "She's busy." The lie tasted bitter. He nodded slowly. "Good. We need to talk." "Margaret, the envelope." Grandma pulled out a thick manila envelope from her bag. "Are you sure about this, Thomas?" "Show her." Inside were documents, lots of them. But these weren't like the ones Mom and Ethan had. These were different. Proof of shell companies, fake accounts, years of systematic theft from Dad's business. All traced back to Ethan. "Your mother thinks she's so clever," Dad said, his voice stronger now. "But I've known about Ethan's schemes for months. Been gathering evidence, building a case." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "Because," Grandma Margaret cut in, "we needed them to show their hand, to prove what they were planning. And now we have it," I said, pulling out my phone and playing the recording from the cafe. Dad's eyes widened as he listened. When it finished, he reached for my hand. "You're so much braver than I was, Jamie. I should have confronted them years ago." "It's not too late," I started, but a commotion in the hallway cut me off. "I don't care about visiting hours." Mom's voice carried through the door. "That's my husband." Dad squeezed my hand. "Hide these," he whispered, pushing the envelope toward me. "And Jamie? Whatever happens next, remember. The truth always comes out." I barely had time to stuff the envelope into my backpack before Mom burst in. Ethan right behind her. She froze when she saw us all there, her carefully applied makeup not quite hiding her shock. "Family meeting?" she asked, trying to smile. How lovely. But her eyes were fixed on Dad's hand, still clasped in mine, and for the first time, I saw real fear in my mother's face. The machine started screaming at 3:47 a.m. I know because I was watching the clock, counting minutes while Dad slept, when suddenly everything went wrong. Code Blue Room 415, blared over the speakers. Doctors rushed in, shoving me aside. Mom wasn't there. She'd left hours ago with Ethan, claiming exhaustion. Only Grandma Margaret and I had stayed, keeping our vigil. Jamie, Dad had whispered earlier between labored breaths. The safe. Behind the painting in my office. Remember the combination. Your wedding anniversary, I'd answered automatically. He'd smiled weakly. No. Your birthday. It's always been your birthday. Now, watching the doctor's work, those words echoed in my head. The safe. Whatever was in there, he wanted me to find it before Mom did. Clear. Someone shouted. Dad's body jerked. Grandma Margaret pulled me close, her arms steel bands around my shoulders. Look at me, not at them, she ordered. Whatever happens next, we stick to the plan. The monitor's steady tone turned into peaks and valleys again. The doctors stepped back, talking in low voices about stabilization and time running out. My phone buzzed, a text from Riley. Your mom just left her house. With suitcases. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. Grandma, I whispered, showing her the message. Her face hardened. Go. I'll stay with your father. Whatever's in that safe, we can't let them get to it first. I ran. The hospital corridors blurred past, my footsteps echoing in the pre-dawn emptiness. Outside, Riley was waiting in her sister's borrowed car. Mom's heading to the house, she said as I jumped in. Ethan's car is behind her. We beat them there by minutes. The house was dark and silent as I fumbled with my key. Up the stairs, down the hall, into Dad's office, every shadow seemed to reach for us. Hurry, Riley whispered, watching the street. The painting was heavy, but we managed to move it. My fingers trembled as I spun the dial. My birthday, 0-7-2-5. The safe clicked open just as headlights swept across the windows. Inside was a single USB drive and a letter addressed to me. I shoved both into my pocket as car doors slammed outside. Jamie. Mom's voice carried up from downstairs. Why are the lights on? Riley grabbed my arm. Back door. Now. We made it halfway down the back stairs when the office light flicked on above us. Mom's gasp was audible even from here. The safe, she hissed. Ethan, it's open. We ran. Through the kitchen, past the garage, into the pre-dawn darkness. Behind us, I heard Mom shouting my name, her voice cracking with something that might have been fear or rage. My phone rang. Grandma Margaret. Jamie, where are you? Got it. I gasped, still running. Whatever it is, I got it. Come back to the hospital. Now. Her voice changed. Your father. He's asking for you. It's time. The world stopped spinning. Riley must have seen something in my face because she was already turning the car around, heading back to the hospital. We made it in time. Barely. Did you get it? Dad whispered when I reached his side. I squeezed his hand. Yes. Good girl. His eyes drifted to the door where Mom stood, breathless from chasing us. Vivian. Perfect timing. Always were good at that. Thomas. Mom started, but he cut her off. I know about the contracts, Vivian. About Ethan. About everything. Each word seemed to cost him, but he kept going. Jamie knows too. And soon everyone will. Mom's perfectly composed face cracked. Thomas, please. The monitor started screaming again. This time, when the doctors rushed in, they didn't make us leave. Maybe they knew. Maybe they saw in Dad's eyes what we all saw. That this time was different. He squeezed my hand one last time. Remember, he whispered. The truth always comes out. I finished for him. He smiled. And then he was gone. In the chaos that followed, I felt the USB drive pressing against my hip, heavy with secrets. Mom stood frozen in the doorway, mascara tracking down her cheeks, looking lost for the first time in my life. The truth was coming out, all right. But first I had a funeral to plan. The funeral home smelled like artificial flowers and secrets. I sat in the front row, Dad's USB drive heavy in my pocket, while Mom played the grieving widow perfectly. Even her tears seemed choreographed. Such a tragedy, people kept saying. And so young. If they only knew. The lawyer, Mr. Davidson, arrived exactly on schedule. Mom's face lit up when she saw him, but something in his expression made my stomach clench. "Before we proceed with the memorial," he announced, "Mr. Caldwell requested that his last will and testament be read here, among family and friends." Mom's hand found mine, squeezing too tight. "Jamie, darling, perhaps we should wait. The reading was specifically scheduled for today," Mr. Davidson continued, at Thomas's insistence. I watched Mom's perfectly manicured nails dig into her palm. Beside her, Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "To my beloved wife, Vivian," the lawyer read, and Mom sat up straighter. "I leave you with the knowledge that I know everything. The affair, the embezzlement, the planned takeover. Everything." The room went dead silent. Mom's hand jerked away from mine like she'd been burned. "To my daughter, Jamie, I leave controlling interest in Caldwell Construction, to be managed by my mother Margaret until Jamie's 21st birthday. Additionally, all personal assets and properties are to be held in trust for Jamie's benefit." "This is ridiculous." Mom stood up, her voice shaking. "He was sick, not thinking clearly. The will was updated and notarized 3 months ago," Mr. Davidson cut in. "Thomas was of sound mind. He was manipulated." Mom pointed at me, mascara starting to run. "By them. His mother and that calculating little Vivian." Grandma Margaret's voice cracked like a whip. "Think very carefully about your next words." That's when I pulled out the USB drive. "Dad left something else too." Mom's face went white. "Jamie, wait." I handed it to Mr. Davidson, who plugged it into his laptop. The projector screen at the front of the room, meant for a photo tribute, flickered to life. Security camera footage filled the screen. Mom and Ethan in Dad's office late at night rifling through files. Bank statements showing systematic theft. Recordings from the cafe, from the hospital, all of it playing out in high definition. "Turn it off," Mom whispered. "Why?" My voice shook. "Isn't this what you wanted? For everyone to see the truth. You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. You never loved him. Any of it. It was all just a game to you." Ethan stood up, straightening his tie. "This is all very dramatic, but these videos prove nothing illegal." Actually, a new voice cut in. "They prove quite a bit." 2 men in suits stepped forward from the back of the room. "Police detectives," I realized. Dad had thought of everything. "Vivian Caldwell and Ethan Grant," one said. "We'd like you to come with us to answer some questions about financial fraud and conspiracy." What happened next seemed to play out in slow motion. Mom lunging for the laptop, Ethan making a break for the door, the detectives moving in, and me standing there watching my family implode in front of everyone we knew. "Jamie," Mom called as they led her away, "please, I can explain everything." But I turned away, her words hitting my back like stones. Later, after the chaos died down and most people had left, I sat alone in the empty funeral home. The photo tribute now played as intended. Images of Dad through the years. Always smiling, always strong. "You did the right thing," Grandma Margaret said, sitting beside me. "Then why does it feel so awful?" "Because you're not like them. You still care." I watched Dad's face smiling down at us. "What happens now?" "Now." She squeezed my hand. "Now we rebuild. Together." But as we left the funeral home, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Mom's last look hadn't been one of defeat. It had been a promise. And I had a feeling I knew exactly what she was promising. The police station's interview room felt smaller with each passing hour. Mom sat across from me, her orange jumpsuit a jarring contrast to her usual designer clothes. 2 weeks in jail had stripped away her perfect makeup and manicure, but somehow she looked more dangerous, not less. "You really think you've won, don't you?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "My clever, righteous daughter. This isn't about winning." I placed Dad's diary on the table between us. "It's about the truth." "The truth?" She laughed. "You want the truth? Your father trapped me. Married me when I was barely older than you are now. Did you ever wonder why?" My hands clenched under the table. "Don't." "Because I was pregnant. With a baby that wasn't his." Her words hit like slaps. But I lost it. And by then I was stuck. He knew what he was doing, Jamie. The perfect businessman. Always in control. The detective behind the two-way mirror had warned me about this. How she'd try to manipulate me, twist everything around. But knowing it was coming didn't make it hurt less. So that justifies stealing from him? Planning to take everything while he was dying. I earned that money. She leaned forward, mask finally cracking. 15 years playing the devoted wife, raising his precious daughter. I was never precious to you. The words came out before I could stop them. I was just part of your cover story. Something flickered in her eyes, pain maybe or regret. But it vanished quickly. You're right, she said softly. You were always his. Never mine. Just like everything else. The door opened. Ethan was let in, handcuffed, looking considerably less polished than the last time I'd seen him. Showtime, he said, taking the seat beside Mom. Did you tell her? Tell me what? Mom's smile returned, triumphant now. About the offshore accounts. The ones your father never found. The ones with your name on them. My blood ran cold. You're lying. Am I? She slid a paper across the table. Check the dates. Those accounts were created the day you were born. Your father wasn't the only one making plans. I stared at the document, recognition hitting hard. The account numbers matched ones I'd seen in Dad's files, the ones he'd been investigating before he died. Why are you showing me this? Because, Ethan said, those accounts are still active, and the statute of limitations on reporting them expires in 48 hours. Mom reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. I jerked away. You have a choice, Jamie. Turn in those accounts and you'll implicate yourself in tax fraud. Stay quiet and well. She shrugged. Let's just say there's enough there for college. Maybe even that art school you always wanted. The room seemed to spin. Dad's voice echoed in my head. The truth always comes out. I stood up, chair scraping loud against the floor. Detective Carter? I called. The door opened. The detective entered, followed by Mr. Davidson and another man I didn't recognize. Did you get all that? I asked. Mom's face went slack as Carter nodded, holding up a recording device. Conspiracy to commit tax fraud, the unknown man said, adding that to the existing charges. I'm Agent Phillips, IRS Criminal Investigation. You were wearing a wire? Mom whispered. My own daughter? I learned from the best. I picked up Dad's diary. You taught me all about playing roles, remember? As they led them away, Mom stopped at the door. I did love you, Jamie. In my way. I know, I said. That's what makes it worse. Outside, Grandma Margaret was waiting with Riley. They didn't ask questions, just hugged me while I finally let myself cry. Let's go home, Grandma said. Home. Not the house filled with lies and hidden accounts, but Grandma's little cottage by the lake, where Dad used to take me fishing, where the truth didn't hurt quite so much. The truth always comes out. But sometimes I was learning it sets you free in ways you never expected. 6 months after the trial, I stood in front of Dad's office at Caldwell Construction, key trembling in my hand. The company had survived barely. After the scandal, Grandma Margaret had kept things running with help from Dad's most trusted employees. But today was different. Today was my 16th birthday. You don't have to do this now, Grandma said beside me. But I did. The letter from Mom had arrived that morning. Her prison stationery stark and official. I hadn't opened it yet, but its presence in my pocket felt like a burning coal. The office looked exactly as Dad had left it. His coffee mug still sat on the desk, a ring stain beneath it. Family photos lined the walls, moments frozen in time when we'd all pretended to be happy. He kept everything, I murmured, running my fingers over his desk calendar. Even after he knew about Mom, he kept pretending for me. No, Grandma corrected gently. He kept fighting for you. There's a difference. I sat in his chair, the leather still holding the shape of him somehow. The computer hummed to life and I typed in my birthday. The password he'd chosen long before any of this began. A video file popped up immediately. For Jamie's 16th birthday. My throat tightened. Grandma, I'll give you a minute. Dad's face filled the screen, recorded in this very office. He looked tired but determined. Happy birthday, sweetheart. If you're watching this, then everything went according to plan. The truth came out just like I promised. He smiled sadly. But that's not why I made this video. I pressed my hands against the desk, steadying myself. I need you to understand something. Your mother. She wasn't always what she became. There was light in her once, Joy. The world just taught her the wrong lessons about survival. He leaned closer to the camera. Don't let it teach you the same ones. The letter in my pocket seemed heavier. You'll have choices to make now. About forgiveness, about trust. About who you want to be. Choose wisely, but choose with your heart, not just your head. His eyes crinkled with that familiar warmth. I love you, Jamie. That's the truest thing I know. The screen went dark. With shaking hands, I opened Mom's letter. Dear Jamie, I won't ask for forgiveness. We both know I haven't earned it. But there's something you should know. The day you were born, your father made me a promise. He said no matter what happened between us, he would make sure you grew up strong enough to face the truth, whatever it might be. He kept his promise. I broke mine. The offshore accounts weren't just insurance policies. They were escape routes. Not just from your father, but from myself. I never used them because deep down I knew. Running away doesn't change who you are. You're stronger than I ever was. Braver too. Don't let my mistakes become your boundaries. Love, even if I showed it wrong. Mom. Riley found me later at the lake behind Grandma's cottage, skipping stones like Dad taught me. You okay? She asked, settling beside me. No, I admitted. But I will be. The next stone skipped 5 times before sinking. Dad's record was 7. I'm keeping the company, I said finally. But I'm changing things. Starting a scholarship program for kids who've lost parents. Maybe a support group. Turning pain into purpose? Something like that. I pulled out Mom's letter. Want to help me write a response? Riley grinned. Always. The sun was setting over the lake, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. Somewhere between the truth coming out and the healing setting in, I'd learned something Dad never got the chance to tell me. Sometimes the strongest choice isn't between forgiveness and justice, but finding the courage to hold both at once. I had time to figure out the rest. After all, I was my father's daughter. And my mother's too, for better or worse. But most importantly, I was finally completely myself.
The shrill ring of my phone pierced the silence of my office, making me jump. I glanced at the caller ID and felt my stomach knot. Patricia. My mother-in-law's name on the screen was enough to send a wave of dread through me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself before answering. Hello, Patricia, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Olivia, dear, her saccharine tone oozed through the speaker. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. I bit back a sarcastic response. Of course, she was interrupting. She always did. What can I do for you? I asked instead. Well, I was just wondering if you'd picked up Connor's dry cleaning yet. You know how he likes his shirts pressed just so for work. I closed my eyes, counting to 5 in my head. Patricia, I'm at work. Connor can pick up his own dry cleaning. Oh, Olivia, she tutted. A good wife takes care of these things. You wouldn't want Connor to look unprofessional, would you? Before I could respond, my office door opened. Ethan, my colleague, poked his head in. He mouthed, Meeting in 5, and I nodded gratefully. I have to go, Patricia. I have a meeting. Of course, dear. We'll talk later about the dry cleaning. I hung up, feeling a headache brewing behind my eyes. Ethan lingered in the doorway, concern etched on his face. Everything okay? He asked. I forced a smile. Just the usual mother-in-law drama. Ethan shook his head. I don't know how you put up with it. You're a saint, Olivia. If only he knew. If only anyone knew the half of what I dealt with daily. I gathered my notes for the meeting, trying to push thoughts of Patricia out of my mind. As we walked to the conference room, Ethan leaned in. Hey, a bunch of us are going for drinks after work. Want to join? The offer was tempting, a chance to unwind, to be around people who actually appreciated me, but I knew what awaited me at home if I was late. I can't, I said, regret coloring my voice. Connor's expecting me. Ethan's disappointment was palpable, but he nodded understandingly. The meeting dragged on, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about Connor, about how he'd react if he knew the truth about my job, about how much I really made. It was a secret I'd kept for years, partly out of habit, partly out of fear of Patricia's reaction. As I drove home that evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Connor. "Mom's coming over for dinner. Pick up some wine?" I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. Of course, Patricia was coming over. She always found a way to insert herself into our lives. I walked into our house, arms laden with groceries and the requested wine. The sound of Patricia's laughter drifted from the kitchen, along with the aroma of something burning. "Olivia, dear," Patricia called out. "We're in here. I'm just showing Connor how to properly cook a roast. The poor boy's been living off your attempts at cooking for far too long." I set the bags down, taking a moment to compose myself before entering the kitchen. Connor stood by the stove, looking lost, while Patricia fussed over a blackened piece of meat. "Hi, honey," Connor said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek. "Mom's teaching me how to cook." I forced a smile. "That's great. I brought wine." Patricia clucked her tongue. "Oh, Olivia, you know Connor prefers beer with his dinner. Wine is so pretentious." I felt something snap inside me. The stress of the day, the constant criticisms, it all came to a head. "Actually," I said, my voice tight, "I brought the wine for me. I think I'm going to need it." The kitchen fell silent. Connor looked bewildered, while Patricia's eyes narrowed. I knew I'd pay for that comment later, but for now, I savored the small victory. As I poured myself a generous glass of wine, I couldn't help but wonder how long I could keep living like this. Something had to give. And soon. I never imagined my life could get worse, but fate has a twisted sense of humor. It was a crisp Sunday morning when Connor dropped the bombshell. "Honey," he said, his voice hesitant, "Mom's lease is up, and she's having trouble finding a new place. I told her she could stay with us for a while." The mug I was holding slipped from my grasp, shattering on the kitchen floor. Coffee splattered everywhere, but I barely noticed. "You did what?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Connor rushed to clean up the mess, avoiding my gaze. "It's just temporary, Olivia. She's family. We can't leave her without a place to stay." I stood there, frozen, as the reality of the situation sank in. Patricia, living with us. The thought made me physically ill. "When?" I managed to ask. "She's moving in today," Connor replied, still not meeting my eyes. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Connor practically sprinted to answer it, leaving me alone in the kitchen, surrounded by broken ceramic and spilled coffee. Patricia's voice floated through the house, saccharine sweet. "Oh, Connor, darling! Thank you so much for this. You're such a good son." I took a deep breath, plastered on a fake smile, and went to greet my new housemate. The next few days were a blur of passive-aggressive comments and thinly veiled insults. Patricia had taken over our guest room, but her presence seemed to fill every corner of the house. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Patricia sauntered into the kitchen. "Olivia, dear," she said, her tone dripping with false concern, "don't you think those pants are a bit tight? A woman your age should be more mindful of her figure." I gripped the knife I was using to chop vegetables tighter. "My pants are fine, Patricia," I said through gritted teeth. She tsked. "If you say so, dear. I just worry about Connor. Men can be so easily tempted when their wives let themselves go." Before I could retort, Connor walked in. "Something smells great," he said, oblivious to the tension. Patricia beamed at him. "I was just giving Olivia some fashion advice. You know how I worry about you two." Connor laughed. "Mom, you don't need to worry about us. Olivia and I are fine." I turned back to the stove, fighting back tears of frustration. We were not fine. We were far from fine. The next morning, I woke up to find Patricia rearranging our living room. She had moved all the furniture and was hanging new curtains. "Patricia," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "what are you doing?" She turned, a picture of innocence. "Oh, Olivia, I hope you don't mind. This room needed a woman's touch. It was so drab before." I closed my eyes, counting to 10. When I opened them, Patricia was still there, smiling that infuriating smile. "This is my house," I said quietly. "You can't just change things without asking." Patricia's smile faltered for a moment before returning full force. "Don't be silly, dear. This is Connor's house too, and he loves what I've done with the place." As if on cue, Connor walked in. "Wow, Mom, the room looks great." I felt something inside me snap. Without a word, I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house. I found myself in the parking lot at work, not even remembering the drive. Ethan was just arriving, and his face lit up when he saw me. "Olivia, what are you doing here on a Saturday?" I burst into tears, the stress of the past few days finally overwhelming me. Ethan rushed over, concern etched on his face. Hey, he said softly, pulling me into a hug. What's wrong? Through my sobs, I managed to explain the situation. Ethan listened, his face growing darker with each word. Olivia, he said when I finished, you can't keep living like this. It's not healthy. I nodded, wiping my eyes. I know, but what can I do? She's Connor's mother. Ethan looked at me, his eyes intense. You have options, Olivia, more than you realize. As I stood there in the parking lot, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe Ethan was right. Maybe I did have options, and maybe it was time I started exploring them. The weeks that followed Patricia's move-in were a living nightmare. Every morning, I'd wake up hoping it had all been a bad dream, only to hear her shrill voice echoing through the house. Today was no different. Olivia, Patricia called from downstairs. Connor's shirts need ironing. I gritted my teeth, counting to 10 before responding. I'm getting ready for work, Patricia. Connor can iron his own shirts. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made my heart race. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of disapproval. A good wife takes care of her husband, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. But I suppose that's too much to ask of you. Before I could retort, Connor appeared behind his mother. It's okay, Mom, I can do it myself. Patricia turned to him, all sweetness and light. Oh, honey, you shouldn't have to. That's what wives are for. I felt something snap inside me. That's it, I said, my voice low and dangerous. I'm leaving for work. Don't wait up. I brushed past them both, ignoring Connor's confused calls. As I slammed the front door behind me, I felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief to be away from Patricia's constant criticism, guilt for leaving Connor to deal with her alone. At work, I threw myself into my projects, desperate for any distraction. Ethan noticed my frazzled state and cornered me in the break room. Olivia, he said gently, you can't keep going on like this. You look exhausted. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. I know, Ethan, but what can I do? She's always there, always criticizing, always undermining me. Ethan's eyes hardened. You need to stand up for yourself. Tell Connor how you feel. I laughed bitterly. I've tried. He just doesn't see it. To him, she's just being helpful. As I spoke, my phone buzzed with a text from Connor. Mom wants to know what's for dinner. She says your cooking could use some work. I showed Ethan the message, my hands shaking with anger. He read it, his face darkening. That's it, he said firmly. You're coming home with me tonight. You need a break from all this. Part of me wanted to protest, to be the dutiful wife and go home. But a larger part, the part that was tired of being belittled and ignored, nodded in agreement. I texted Connor back. Working late, order takeout. Ethan's apartment was small but cozy, a stark contrast to the tension-filled house I'd left behind. As we sat on his couch, nursing glasses of wine, I felt myself relax for the first time in weeks. Thank you, I said softly. I didn't realize how much I needed this. Ethan smiled, his eyes warm. Anytime, Olivia. You deserve so much better than what you're getting at home. As the night wore on, I found myself opening up to Ethan in a way I hadn't with anyone in years. I told him about my secret career success, about the constant pressure from Patricia, about Connor's indifference. Why do you stay? Ethan asked, his voice gentle but probing. I stared into my wine glass, searching for an answer. I don't know anymore. Just then, my phone exploded with notifications, missed calls and texts from Connor and Patricia. I scrolled through them, my heart sinking with each message. Where are you? Mom's worried sick. How could you be so selfish? A good wife doesn't stay out all night. The last message made me see red. Without thinking, I dialed Connor's number. Olivia, he answered, his voice a mixture of relief and anger. Where the hell are you? I'm safe, I said, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. And I'm not coming home tonight. What? But Mom, I cut him off. No, Connor, not this time. I can't do this anymore. Your mother, your indifference, all of it. I'm done. As I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Ethan looked at me, a mixture of concern and admiration in his eyes. What now? He asked softly. I took a deep breath, feeling for the first time in years like I was in control of my own life. Now, I said, I start fighting back. The morning after my night at Ethan's, I returned home to face the music. As I stepped through the front door, the silence was deafening. Then, like a storm breaking, Patricia's voice rang out. Well, look who finally decided to grace us with her presence, she sneered from the living room. Connor sat beside her, his face a mask of disappointment and confusion. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Patricia scoffed. About your shameful behavior? I should say so. No, I replied, looking directly at Connor. About us, about this situation. Connor shifted uncomfortably. Olivia, can't we just forget about last night? Mom was worried sick. I felt my resolve hardening. No, Connor, we can't just forget. This isn't working. Your mother living here, her constant criticism, your indifference, it's killing me. Patricia stood up, her eyes flashing. How dare you, after everything we've done for you? I laughed bitterly. Done for me? You've done nothing but tear me down since the day I married Connor. The argument escalated quickly, voices rising, accusations flying. In the heat of the moment, I revealed my secret. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family, I shouted. I'm the one who's been supporting us. My job, my success, it's all been for us. The room fell silent. Connor stared at me, shocked. Patricia's face contorted with a mixture of disbelief and anger. What are you talking about? Connor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Before I could respond, a wave of dizziness hit me. The room started to spin, and I felt my knees buckle. The last thing I heard was Connor calling my name as everything went black. I woke up in a hospital bed, the steady beep of monitors filling the room. Ethan was by my side, concern etched on his face. What happened? I croaked, my throat dry. You collapsed at home, Ethan explained softly. Exhaustion and severe stress, the doctors said. You've been out for a day. I closed my eyes, the memories flooding back. Connor? Ethan's expression darkened. He was here earlier, left when I arrived. A nurse entered, checking my vitals. Mrs. Thompson, how are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck, I admitted. She nodded sympathetically. That's to be expected. Your body's been under extreme stress. You need rest and a major lifestyle change. As she left, Ethan took my hand. Olivia, this can't go on. You're killing yourself. I nodded, tears welling up. I know, but what can I do? It's my home, my marriage. Is it worth your life? Ethan asked gently. Before I could answer, the door opened. Connor walked in, looking haggard. His eyes narrowed when he saw Ethan. Could you give us a minute? He asked, his tone clipped. Ethan squeezed my hand before leaving, throwing a concerned glance over his shoulder. Connor sat in the chair Ethan had vacated. Why didn't you tell me? He asked, his voice a mixture of hurt and anger. About your job, about how you were feeling. I sighed, feeling drained. Would you have listened? Every time I tried to talk about your mother, you dismissed my concerns. Connor ran a hand through his hair. I never meant. I didn't realize. That's the problem, Connor, I said softly. You never realized. You never saw how much I was struggling. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. What do we do now? He asked. I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time in years I saw clearly. I saw a man who, despite his good intentions, had consistently chosen his mother over his wife, a man who had stood by while I was belittled and broken down. I don't know, I replied honestly, but I know I can't go back to the way things were. I won't survive it. Connor nodded slowly, a look of resignation crossing his face. And your colleague, Ethan? He's been a friend when I needed one, I said firmly. Nothing more. As Connor left, promising to return later, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. For the first time in years, I was putting myself first. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. Things had to change, and they had to change now. After a week in the hospital, I returned home with a mix of dread and determination. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the hallway. Welcome back, Connor said, emerging from the kitchen. His voice was strained, the tension between us palpable. I nodded, unsure of what to say. The revelation of my financial success still hung in the air, unaddressed. Where's Patricia? I asked, dreading the answer. Connor sighed. In the guest room. She's not happy, I snorted. When is she ever? As if summoned by our conversation, Patricia appeared at the top of the stairs. Her eyes narrowed as she saw me. So the prodigal daughter-in-law returns, she sneered. I hope you're proud of yourself, worrying us all like that. I felt my blood begin to boil. Proud? Of being worked to the point of collapse? Of being constantly belittled and criticized in my own home? Patricia descended the stairs, her face a mask of indignation. How dare you? After everything we've done for you." "Enough, Mom," Connor interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. I laughed bitterly. "Everything you've done for me? You mean moving in uninvited? Criticizing my every move, making me feel worthless in my own home?" Patricia's face reddened. "I've only ever tried to help. It's not my fault you're so sensitive. But then again, what can we expect from someone with your background?" The room fell silent. Connor's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, my voice dangerously low. Patricia smirked, sensing she'd struck a nerve. "Well, dear, it's no secret that you come from, shall we say, humble beginnings. No wonder you struggle to be a proper wife. You never had a good example, did you?" I felt as if I'd been slapped. "How dare you bring my parents into this?" "Mom, that's enough," Connor said, but Patricia was on a roll. "It's the truth, isn't it? Your poor, deceased parents. What would they think of you now? Lying about your job, neglecting your wifely duties." Something inside me snapped. Years of pent-up frustration and anger came pouring out. "My parents would be proud of me," I shouted. "They taught me to work hard, to stand up for myself. They loved me unconditionally, something you clearly know nothing about." Patricia gasped, clutching her chest in mock offense. "Well, I never—" "No, you never." I cut her off. "You never cared about anyone but yourself. You've manipulated Connor his entire life, and now you're trying to do the same to me. But I won't let you. Not anymore." I turned to Connor, who stood frozen, his eyes darting between his mother and me. "Connor," I said, my voice shaking with emotion, "I can't do this anymore. I won't live like this. It's her or me." The silence that followed was deafening. Connor opened his mouth, then closed it again at a loss for words. Patricia recovered first. "Don't be ridiculous, Olivia. Connor would never choose you over his own mother." "Would you, darling?" Connor's lack of response was all the answer I needed. In that moment, I saw our entire marriage laid bare. Years of compromise, of putting everyone else's needs before my own, of slowly losing myself. "I see," I said quietly. The calm that washed over me was almost frightening. "Then I've made my decision." I walked past them both, heading for the stairs. Connor finally found his voice. "Olivia, wait, where are you going?" I paused, looking back at them. Patricia stood triumphant, while Connor looked lost and confused. "I'm packing my bags," I said. "I'm leaving." As I climbed the stairs, I heard Patricia's smug voice. "Good riddance, you'll be back, begging for forgiveness." But I knew I wouldn't. For the first time in years, I felt free. The road ahead was uncertain, but anything was better than staying in this toxic environment. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I made a silent promise to myself. No more compromising my worth, no more letting others dictate my life. It was time to reclaim my independence, my self-respect, and my happiness. The Olivia who walked out of that house was not the same one who had entered it years ago. She was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next, alone if necessary. I stood in the lobby of the law firm, my heart pounding. This was it, the point of no return. I'd spent the last week in a hotel, ignoring Connor's calls and texts, steeling myself for this moment. As I rode the elevator to the 15th floor, I replayed the events that led me here, each floor bringing a new memory of hurt and disappointment. The receptionist ushered me into a plush office where a stern-faced woman sat behind an imposing desk. "Mrs. Thompson," she greeted, gesturing for me to sit. "I'm Margaret Winters. You're here to discuss divorce proceedings?" I nodded, my throat suddenly dry. "Yes, I can't continue in my marriage." As we discussed the details, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. This was the end of a chapter in my life, but also the beginning of a new one. Halfway through our meeting, my phone buzzed incessantly. Connor's name flashed on the screen. I silenced it, but the interruption had shaken me. "Is everything all right?" Margaret asked, her eyes sharp. I took a deep breath. "Yes, it's just my husband. He doesn't know I'm here." Margaret's expression softened slightly. "Mrs. Thompson, are you sure about this? Divorce is a big step." "I'm sure," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "I can't live like this anymore." As we wrapped up the meeting, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Ethan. "Olivia, where are you?" "Connor's here at the office looking for you. He seems really upset." My blood ran cold. How did Connor know where I worked? I'd always kept my job a secret from him and Patricia. "I have to go," I told Margaret abruptly, gathering my things. I rushed out of the office, my mind racing. As the elevator descended, I tried to calm my nerves. What was Connor doing at my workplace? How much did he know? The doors opened, and I stepped into the lobby, only to come face to face with Connor and Patricia. "Olivia," Connor said, his voice a mixture of relief and anger. "What's going on? Where have you been?" I stood my ground despite the urge to run. "I told you, Connor, I'm leaving. I can't do this anymore." Patricia stepped forward, her eyes flashing. "Don't be ridiculous, Olivia. You're coming home with us right now." "No, I'm not," I said firmly. "I'm done letting you control my life." Connor looked bewildered. "Control your life? Olivia, what are you talking about?" I laughed bitterly. "You really don't see it, do you? How your mother has manipulated every aspect of our marriage, how you've always chosen her over me." "That's not true," Connor protested weakly. "Isn't it?" I challenged. "Then why are you here with her instead of coming to find me on your own?" Connor fell silent, and I saw a flicker of realization in his eyes. Patricia, sensing she was losing control, changed tactics. "Olivia, dear, we're just worried about you. You've been acting so strangely lately. Is it stress from work? Maybe you should take some time off." "My work is not the problem," I said, my voice rising. "My work is the only thing that's kept me sane. Do you want to know the truth, Connor? I'm the one who's been supporting us. My job, my success, it's all been for us, and you never even noticed." The lobby fell silent. Connor's face paled, while Patricia looked like she'd been slapped. What do you mean?" Connor stammered. I took a deep breath, years of pent-up frustration pouring out. "I mean that while you've been letting your mother run our lives, I've been working my way up in my career. I'm a senior executive now, Connor. I make 3 times what you do. And I've kept it a secret because I knew Patricia would find a way to use it against me, to make me feel small and insignificant like she always does." Patricia's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little—" "No," I cut her off. "I'm done being grateful for your abuse. I'm done pretending everything is fine when it's not. I'm filing for divorce, Connor. It's over." As I turned to leave, Connor grabbed my arm. "Olivia, please. We can work this out. I had no idea." I pulled away, tears stinging my eyes. "That's the problem, Connor. You never had any idea, and now it's too late." I walked out of the lobby, leaving Connor and Patricia standing there, shocked and silent. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, I felt free. The days following my confrontation with Connor and Patricia were a blur of legal meetings and emotional upheaval. I threw myself into work, grateful for the distraction. Ethan had been a rock, offering support without pushing for more. One evening, as I was leaving the office, my phone rang. Patricia's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated, then answered. "Olivia." Her voice was uncharacteristically soft. "We need to talk, please." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a nearby cafe. As I walked in, I saw her sitting alone, looking smaller and older than I remembered. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. I nodded, wary. "What do you want, Patricia?" She took a deep breath. "I want you to reconsider the divorce. Connor is devastated. I made mistakes, but surely we can work this out." I laughed bitterly. "Work it out? After years of your manipulation and Connor's indifference? It's too late for that." Patricia's eyes flashed with a familiar anger, but she quickly composed herself. "Olivia, be reasonable. Think about what you're giving up. The stability, the family." "The abuse?" I cut in. "The constant criticism? The feeling of never being good enough?" "I was trying to help," Patricia protested. "I only wanted what was best for Connor, for both of you." I shook my head. "No, Patricia, you wanted control. You wanted to keep Connor dependent on you and me in my place." Patricia's facade cracked. "And what's so wrong with that?" I raised Connor. "I know what's best for him. You're just some girl who wormed her way into his life." "I'm his wife," I snapped, my voice rising. "Or at least, I was. I loved him, supported him, built a life with him, and you couldn't stand it." Patricia leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. "Listen to me, Olivia. You don't understand what you're doing. Connor, he's not as strong as you think. He needs me. He needs us." Suddenly I understood. "This isn't about Connor at all, is it? It's about you. You're afraid of losing the lifestyle's desperation turned to anger. You ungrateful little bitch. After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? By abandoning my son?" The The cafe fell silent, all eyes on us. I felt a lifetime of pent-up emotions bubbling to the surface. "Done for me?" I said, my voice dangerously low. "You've done nothing but tear me down since the day I married Connor. You've criticized my cooking, my housekeeping, my career. You've manipulated Connor against me at every turn. And now you have the audacity to act like I owe you something?" Patricia stood up, her face red with rage. "You'll regret this, Olivia. You think you can just walk away? I'll make sure you lose everything in this divorce. Everything." I laughed, a sound that surprised even me. "Go ahead and try, Patricia. I'm not afraid of you anymore." As I turned to leave, Patricia called out one last time, "He'll never let you go, you know. Connor will fight this divorce every step of the way." I paused at the door, looking back at the woman who had made my life hell for so long. Then let him fight. I'm done being the victim in this story. Walking out of that cafe, I felt lighter than I had in years. The road ahead would be difficult, I knew that. But for the first time, I was ready to face it on my own terms. No more compromises, no more sacrifices. It was time to reclaim my life, whatever the cost. 6 months after my confrontation with Patricia, I stood in my new apartment, surrounded by boxes and the promise of a fresh start. The divorce had been finalized last week, and despite Connor's initial threats, it had gone smoother than I'd expected. My financial success had been my ace in the hole, leaving Patricia and Connor with no leverage. As I unpacked, my phone buzzed. It was Ethan. "Hey," I answered, a smile in my voice. "How's the unpacking going?" he asked. "Slowly but surely," I replied. "Want to come over and help?" There was a pause. "Actually, I'm already outside your building. I brought dinner." My heart skipped a beat. Ethan had been a constant support throughout the divorce, but we'd kept things strictly platonic. Until now. I buzzed him up, suddenly nervous. As I opened the door, I saw Ethan standing there, holding takeout bags and wearing a hesitant smile. "I hope this is okay," he said. I pulled him into a hug. "It's more than okay." As we ate, sitting on boxes because I hadn't unpacked my furniture yet, Ethan filled me in on the office gossip. Apparently, my divorce and subsequent promotion had caused quite a stir. "Oh, and you'll never guess who I saw today," Ethan said, his tone cautious. I raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Connor and Patricia. They were at the bank, looking pretty stressed." I felt a twinge of something. Not regret exactly, but a complex mix of emotions. How did they look? Ethan hesitated. "Not great. Connor looked like he hadn't slept in days, and Patricia, well, she's definitely not living the high life anymore." I nodded, processing this information. Part of me felt a grim satisfaction, but another part felt an unexpected pang of sadness. "Olivia," Ethan said softly, "are you okay?" I took a deep breath. "You know what? I really am. For the first time in years, I feel free." Ethan reached out, taking my hand. "You deserve to be happy, Olivia. You've been through so much." As I looked into his eyes, I felt a warmth I hadn't experienced in a long time. But before I could respond, my phone rang. It was Connor. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" Olivia, Connor's voice was strained. I need your help." I closed my eyes, steeling myself. "What is it, Connor?" "It's Mom. She's not doing well. The stress of everything, it's taken a toll on her health. We can't afford her medical bills, and I don't know what to do." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Anger at the audacity of him asking for help after everything, pity for Patricia's situation, and a strange sense of power, knowing I held their fate in my hands. "Connor," I said, my voice steady, "I'm sorry about Patricia's health, but I can't help you, not anymore." "But Olivia?" "No, Connor, you and Patricia made your choices. Now you have to live with them, just like I had to live with the consequences of your actions for years." There was a long silence. Then, "I understand. I'm sorry, Olivia, for everything." As I hung up, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The last tie to my old life had been severed. Ethan was watching me, concern etched on his face. "Everything okay?" I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "Yes, everything is finally okay." I stood up, pulling Ethan with me. "Come on, help me unpack these boxes. I think it's time to start filling this new life with some happy memories." As we worked side by side, laughing and sharing stories, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The road had been long and painful, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and truly free. Patricia and Connor's downfall wasn't a victory to celebrate, but a reminder of the importance of independence and self-respect. And as I looked at Ethan, I saw the possibility of a future filled with mutual respect and genuine love. This was my new chapter, my fresh start, and for the first time in years I was excited about what the future held. The woman who had entered that toxic marriage years ago was gone. In her place stood a stronger, more confident Olivia, ready to face whatever life threw her way. As night fell and the last box was unpacked, I stood at my window, looking out at the city lights. I was no longer Connor's wife or Patricia's daughter-in-law. I was just Olivia. And that, I realized, was more than enough.